heard the phrase death and taxes? It's that old saying that's meant to remind us that life's only certainties are paying taxes and eventually passing away. But here's the thing, what happens when those two certainties collide in the most dramatic way possible? So imagine that you're working your entire life, you're amassing a fortune, you are building a legacy, and then boom, out of nowhere, it's all cut in half. And it's not by your family or by your loved ones, but by Uncle Sam. That's exactly what happened with tonight's story, and it involves none other than the music legend Prince. Before we get into it, I want to share a quick disclaimer. These stories are based on real life events, and I have done my best to ensure the facts are accurate and true to life. That said, some of the details that I share may have been expanded upon or adapted for storytelling purposes. After all, this is Final Affairs, where we explore the legacies that people leave behind and the chaos that sometimes follows. Sit back, pour yourself a glass of something, and let's get right into it. I'm recommending that you sip on something complex and bold and layered because tonight's story is just that. Prince was nothing if not complex. From his extraordinary rise to fame to the chaos that followed his death, his story has it all. And when I say all, I mean talent, mystery, family drama, spiritual journeys, and the kind of estate battle that will leave you just shaking your head. Now let's start with Prince himself. Because before we can get into the estate chaos, we have to understand the man a little bit better. We have to understand who Prince was behind it all. Prince Rogers Nelson. That's his name. It's very pristine, very royal. He was born on June 7th, 1958 in Minneapolis, Minnesota. His parents, John Nelson and Maddie Shaw, they were both musicians. John was a jazz pianist. He was strict, he was enigmatic. And Maddie, she was a singer. She was more nurturing, more encouraging. But their relationship was so tumultuous. It was filled with arguments and misunderstandings. And by the time Prince was 10, his parents divorced, leaving a young boy caught between two worlds. See, John Nelson remarried, and Prince just suddenly found himself navigating a blended family with half siblings and step parents. His relationship with his father was so complicated. On one hand, Prince idolized him, even taking his father's stage name, Prince Rogers, as his own. And on the other hand, John was distant, demanding. So Maddie provided emotional support where Prince didn't get that from his father. But Prince, as he got older, he increasingly just had to rely on himself and on his music. And that's the way he was able to escape the chaos that he was experiencing at home. See, music wasn't just a hobby for Prince, it was his lifeline. His father left behind a piano when he moved out, and Prince would spend hours on end just teaching himself how to play. He was a self-taught pianist. By the time he was a teenager, he had mastered multiple instruments, from guitar to drums. He could play it all. His early experiments in songwriting were just raw, but they showed glimpses of the genius that he was going to become. Unfortunately, his childhood wasn't without struggles. He was small and he was shy. He was teased by his classmates for his size and his demeanor. And to make matters worse, he developed epilepsy, which led to seizures during his early years. Prince later claimed he was healed by an angel, a belief that reflected the deep spirituality that would define the rest of his life. Just speaking of his spirituality, let's talk about one of the most fascinating aspects of his life, and that was his faith. He was raised as a Seventh-day Adventist, and his early religious upbringing emphasized morality, community, and discipline. Later in 2001, he converted to Jehovah's Witnesses, a decision that profoundly shaped his worldview. This wasn't just a casual affiliation. Prince was deeply committed to his faith. He avoided profanity, even in his music, and reportedly went door to door to share the teachings of Jehovah's Witnesses. Imagine opening your door and seeing Prince standing there with a Bible in hand. Yeah, that's a wild thought. But his faith wasn't without its conflict. Prince's friends and some of the people that he collaborated with struggled to reconcile his religious beliefs with his artistic expression. After all, this was the same man who wrote Darling Nikki, a song so provocative it helped inspire the creation of the parental advisory label. But to Prince, there was no contradiction. He was able to find synergy in his life. His spirituality was part of his evolution, and it influenced every aspect of his life, from his music to his relationship. So by the time Prince was in his early 20s, he was well on his way to becoming a superstar. His first album, For You, it showcased his multi-instrument talents, but it was his second album, Prince, that put him on the map. With hits like I Want to Be Your Love, oh, that's a good one. Prince became known as a boundary-pushing artist who wasn't afraid to just take risks with his music. So this is what he started to become known for in the industry. And then came Purple Rain. So Purple Rain was released in 1984, and the album and the accompanying film, it cemented Prince's place in the pantheon of music legends. When Doves Cry, Let's Go Crazy, Purple Rain, these weren't just songs, they were anthems, literal anthems. But for Prince, the success of Purple Rain wasn't just about fame. For him, it was about freedom. It gave him the leverage to fight for what he wanted most, and that was ownership of his music, which I absolutely love to hear, because owning your intellectual property is so important. In the 1990s, Prince began a highly publicized battle with his record label. He wanted ownership of his master recordings, but the label refused. In protest, Prince changed his name to an unpronounceable symbol, and he began appearing in public with the word slave written on his face. Yeah, controversial. For Prince, this wasn't just a fight for his rights, it was a fight for every artist who had ever been exploited by the music industry. Eventually, Prince won his freedom. It came at a cost, though. The battle with Warner Brothers strained his relationships with the industry executives and left him wary of contracts, of lawyers, and anything that felt like it could compromise his independence. So understandably so. There's so many people who are afraid to work with lawyers because they've been burned. And I hate to hear it, but still, don't be afraid. You need a lawyer, especially if we're dealing with intellectual property. Back to Prince. Despite his public persona as a bold, untouchable artist, his personal life was marked by profound loneliness and tragedy. His relationships, both romantic and platonic, often reflected his complex personality. It was charming, it was intense, and at times distant. He was a man who could write some of the most romantic songs of all times. Yet he struggled to maintain lasting connections. Married twice, his first marriage to backup dancer Mate Garcia in 1996 seemed like a fairy tale at first. Mate was often described as Prince's muse, and their love was immortalized in songs like The Most Beautiful Girl in the World. But their relationship was tested in the most heartbreaking way. In 1996, Mate gave birth to their son, Amir, who tragically died just a week later to a rare genetic disorder. The loss really devastated the both of them. Prince rarely spoke about the experience, but those who were close to him said he was never the same after that loss, which, of course, I can only imagine. His marriage to Mate eventually dissolved soon after. He was unable to withstand the grief and the pressure that I'm sure overwhelmed him. The loss of a child is something that is so unimaginable, so that relationship ended. His second marriage to Manuela Testoloni in 2001 was quieter and less publicized. The two just seemed to share a really deep connection, especially through their mutual commitment to philanthropy and spirituality. But even this relationship ended in divorce in 2006, reportedly because of Prince's intense work ethic, and he had a bit of a controlling nature, similar to his dad in a way. While he had romantic flings and relationships afterwards, Prince just never remarried. His relationships with women were often described as enigmatic. He could be loving and generous, but he could also be demanding and perfectionistic. He just wanted everything to be done in a precise way. And then there was his relationship with his family. Prince's bond with his sister, Tika Nelson, was perhaps the most consistent of his familial connections. Tika is a talented musician in her own right. She often struggled to step out of her brother's shadow, though. She dealt with addiction issues over the years, and it created a tension between her and her brother. But Prince supported her and her music career despite all of this, and he did all he could do when he could do it. His half-siblings, on the other hand, had more distant relationships with him. They respected his talents, but they weren't particularly close. And so Prince's isolation, it just became even more pronounced as he got older. His Paisley Park estate, which doubled as his recording studio and sanctuary, that became a symbol of his desire to retreat from the outside world. While he hosted these extravagant concerts and recording sessions there, he also spent really long stretches just by himself, just alone, immersed in music. And oftentimes that's how musical geniuses are born. But one of the most fascinating aspects of Prince's legacy is his infamous vault. For years, fans and industry insiders speculated about the contents of his highly secured room in Paisley Park. And after Prince's death, the vault was finally opened, and what was inside was nothing short of staggering. The vault contained not tens, not hundreds, but thousands of unreleased recordings. Enough music to release an album every year for the next century. It included full length albums, collaborations with other artists, experimental tracks that no one had ever heard. It included quite a bit. There were videos, there were handwritten lyrics, there were rare footage from Prince's concerts and rehearsals. Some of the recordings dated back to the early days of his career, while others were created in the months leading up to his death. So there was just a wealth of content, and it was clear that he was still in creation mode when he died. But the vault wasn't just a treasure trove, it was a logistical nightmare for his estate. See, without a will or clear instructions, the question of what to do with the vault became a source of contention among the heirs. Should the music be released to the public, or should it remain private as a testament to Prince's perfectionism? After all, Prince was known for being incredibly particular about his music and how his music would be presented. He famously shelved projects if they didn't meet his exacting standards. So, yeah, his perfectionism went way beyond relationships. It was about everything that he created, who he was. So, releasing unfinished or unreleased materials raised ethical questions about whether it would honor or exploit his legacy. And that's where the challenge comes up when there is no will and there are no instructions of what your intentions are. So people have to make the best decisions they can. Eventually, some of the music from the vaults was released, but not without controversy. Albums like Welcome to America and Piano and a Microphone, 1983, offered fans a glimpse into Prince's creative process and unreleased works. But critics and fans alike debated whether these posthumous releases truly honored Prince's vision. After all, Prince was a perfectionist. He didn't release these songs in his lifetime for a reason, right? So maybe they should have never been released to begin with after he died. But some fans worried that releasing incomplete or experimental tracks might actually tarnish his carefully curated legacy. There was a reason why he didn't want to share all of the music and content that he locked away. But here's the thing. The vault wasn't just about Prince's creative genius. It was also about money. The unreleased music was estimated to be worth millions. Music publishing companies and streaming platforms were eager to strike deals, and Primary Wave, the publishing company that eventually acquired a stake in Prince's estate, saw the vault as a gold mine. The heirs, however, were divided. Some wanted to cash in on the vault's potential, while others worried about betraying Prince's wishes. This tension delayed decisions about the vault for years, quite literally, and it added yet another layer of complexity to an already messy estate battle. And let's not forget the family feud. Nelson, that's Prince's younger sister and his only full sibling, was one of the first to step forward after his death. She believed she had a stronger claim to the estate than Prince's half-siblings, who he was less close to. So she argued that she had been closer to him during his lifetime and was more involved in his life, which is true. I mean, that's the reality of the life he lived. He was not close to his half-siblings. She had struggled with addiction and financial instability for much of her life, and Prince had helped her out on several occasions. So she felt her sacrifices and connections to her brother entitled her to a larger share of the estate. Not really sure that's a rational connection, but she definitely was closer to her brother. There's evidence of that. The half-siblings, however, they didn't see it in that way. Under Minnesota's intestate laws, full and half siblings inherit equally when there is no will. Sharon, Norrin, John, Omar, and Alfred, all Prince's half siblings, they fought to ensure they received equal shares of the estate. While some of them had limited relationships with Prince, they argued that the law was clear and they weren't going to let Tika take more than her fair share. Something feels icky about that, but that's what happens. That's the law in intestacy. You don't have a will, the state makes a decision for you. The infighting became so bitter that it spilled into the public eye. Court filings revealed heated accusations and personal grievances. See, Tika reportedly accused her half-siblings of being absent from Prince's life, while the half-siblings accused Tika of trying to manipulate the process to gain control of the estate. The family's inability to agree on even basic decisions delayed the probate process, leading to skyrocketing legal fees and administrative costs, Oftentimes, these are the things that are not considered when there is a probate dispute among family members. Legal costs skyrocket, administrative fees go way up. And then there were the outsiders, the lawyers, those legal fees, the administrators, those administrative costs, and of course, the financial experts that were tasked with managing Prince's estate. So Comerica Bank was appointed as the estate's administrator, and they quickly found themselves in the middle of the chaos. The bank had to navigate competing claims from the heirs, manage the estate's massive tax bill, and figure out how to handle Prince's intellectual property, including what was in this secret vault. The tax bill alone, let's talk about that. That was staggering. Between federal and Minnesota state estate taxes, nearly 50%, you heard that right, 50% of the estate's value. So that's close to $100 million. All of that went to the government. This was a direct result of Prince dying without a will or trust, which would have allowed him to structure his estate to minimize taxes. For a man who spent his life fighting for control over his music and his finances, it was a devastating irony. The legal fees added to the financial strain. And by 2019, Comerica Bank had spent tens of millions of dollars on lawyers and appraisers and other administrative costs. These expenses ate into the estate's value, leaving less for the heirs, obviously. So some of the heirs accused Comerica of mismanaging the estate, leading to yet another round of legal battles. These are heirs who were not even close with him. Just remember that. These are just people who are going to get this financial windfall because by blood there was some connection. And intestacy laws say they get something. So this is not Prince's will in any way. It's not his desire, more than likely, that this, extended family he had no connection to or limited connection to would get, windfall from his estate. First and foremost, though, estate planning matters. That's the lesson learned here. Prince's story is a cautionary tale about what happens when you don't take the time to outline your wishes. A simple will, a trust, that could have prevented years of legal battles here. It could have reduced the tax burden. It could have protected his legacy. For someone as private and meticulous as Prince, the lack of estate planning is almost shocking. But it's a reminder that even the most brilliant minds can overlook practical matters. And so when I emphasize the need for an estate plan, it is not just a lawyer being a lawyer. It really is something that is so important. The second thing I want to emphasize is communicating to your family. That is so key. Prince's family dynamics was complicated to begin with, but clear communication could have eased some of the tension. If Prince had taken time to explain his wishes to somebody, or even to clarify his relationship with his siblings and half-siblings, it might have prevented the infighting that tore his family apart. So even though he didn't have close relationships with his half-siblings, doesn't mean he didn't care for them and didn't want them to get something from his estate. Who knows? But final takeaway here, the story of Prince's estate highlights the importance of thinking beyond yourself. Prince's music wasn't just his, it was part of the cultural fabric. By leaving his estate in disarray, he left his legacy vulnerable to commercialization and exploitation that I know, and we can glean from his story, that he certainly did not want. For artists, for creatives, and for anyone who wants to protect your life's work, estate planning isn't just about money, it's about preserving your vision. Okay. So I'm going to wrap this up. Here are some of my closing thoughts. Prince's life was a masterpiece. It was a blend of talent, of passion, and relentless creativity. But his death was a stark reminder that even the most extraordinary life can leave behind ordinary problems. The chaos of his estate battle overshadowed his legacy for years. But it also served as a wake-up call for anyone who cares about their legacy. Tonight, I want you to raise a glass to the man who gave us Purple Rain, When Doves Cry, and a vault full of mysteries. And let's not forget the lesson here. You thought this story was complicated, honey. There's always more to uncover. So cheers until next time.